So I think in terms of dating, at the time it was hard for me to go through, and being ghosted is always frustrating. And then having to tie it to my disability specifically was challenging for me to kind of sort through. In hindsight, now I'm like, if a guy doesn't want to or can't express, how they're feeling to me, or how a situation might have made them feel, or talk through things that we could come out together on the other side stronger, that's not necessarily, again, like someone I would want to be with if they run the second something like that happens.
Chelsea Bear, welcome to the See-Through podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on. I've been following you on social media for years now. So I've seen so many pieces of your content, and I've always been like, oh, I should reach out to her and I should interview you. And then recently I did, and I was like, oh, you actually agreed to come on. I was super stoked. So thanks for coming on.
Yeah, no, of course. And thank you for following, and I'm excited to be here.
But yeah, I have retinitis pigmentosa, which means my vision's kind of closing in from the outside in. And as it progresses, I will eventually be legally blind. And so that's kind of my perspective as a host. And I talk to a lot of people with visual impairments, but I also talk to people, like you, who live with like cerebral palsy, or, maybe muscular dystrophy, or like any type of disability, because I think there's a lot of overlap in the mental kind of ways we have to adapt to our disabilities.
Yeah.
So I kind of wanted to start off right out the gate and ask you about cerebral palsy, because blindness has this spectrum, where someone like me, like, I don't see well at night, and if you stick your hand out for a handshake, I might not see it because I have missing parts of my vision. And as time goes on, that's going to get worse. And whereas some people with blindness, it's like completely lights out, and then some people who are fully blind see lights and shadow. And there's like basically a spectrum. There's different ways, blindness affects people. And I wanted to ask you about cerebral palsy. Is that such a thing? Like, does cerebral palsy have like a spectrum to it?
Definitely, yeah. It's very interesting, where I feel like the more I learn about a bunch of different disabilities, they all seem to have such differences within themselves. And cerebral palsy is definitely one of them. And, I think looking on paper from a doctor's or medical professional's explanation of CP, it is essentially a brain injury that really can differ based on the what the specific injury is. So for me specifically, I have a type of cerebral palsy called spastic diplegia. So that impacts two of my limbs, which is the di part of it, and that would be my legs. But there's other people with cerebral palsy that only one half of their body is impacted. So let's say, they have limited mobility in both their left arm and their left leg, but their right arm and right leg has a kind of regular range of motion and things like that. So that said, if you've seen videos of me walking, there are also versions of cerebral palsy that are way more mild than mine. That could be something as simple as a limp to the eye. And then there's more severe cases where someone, their speech is impacted, they're unable to be independent, where they need a full-time caregiver, they're unable to walk. So similar to yours, there really is such a large spectrum, and it really just depends on kind of the level of impact during birth and how early you catch it, and also just how you keep up with physical health and things like that.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. I just, that's something that I learned like later in life. I was kind of a late bloomer, to this whole, disability community. Like, I basically had RP, but I kind of avoided thinking about it, but it got to a point where I couldn't, hide it anymore.
Yeah.
And that kind of forced me to kind of, come out to this whole world and join this community. So, learning that, blindness is a spectrum was like a huge win. Like, it just kind of made me like, it just kind of taught me a lot. It's like such a simple phrase that like simplified it, and sometimes like things that are really complicated, you know, it's nice when they can kind of be simplified a little bit. And so, yeah, I'm glad that, you know, it seems like that's true for most disabilities. Like most disabilities lay on some sort of spectrum.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll say from my own experience, so I've had cerebral palsy since birth, but I didn't really start learning about it, as odd as this sounds. I didn't really start learning about it until I was an adult, early adult.
Yeah.
So obviously I've lived with it my whole life. I went to physical therapy when I was a child, and I feel like I was kind of just going through the motions when it came to how I treated or took care of myself with my disability, and of course under my parents' guidance and things like that. But fully grasping, you know, that there are other people out there with the same disability as me, as different disabilities. It's kind of a whole new world once you start to dive in and learn about the different aspects, but it is really comforting in a way to have that community and know that, you know, there are other people out there going through something similar.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And I have another question. Is cerebral palsy degenerative? Like, does it get worse over time?
So there unfortunately isn't that much specific research when it comes to adults with CP. So everything I've heard is kind of like from an adult who's a couple generations older than me, what their experience is. So from my understanding, it doesn't necessarily get worse, the disability itself. But, you know, as you could see, the way I walk, it's not the regular walk. So it's something where, like, you know, my ankles and knees aren't kind of moving the correct way. So I think the older I get, I'll probably start to see more issues with, you know, my muscles or ligaments in that way. Just kind of more wear and tear. And then I've also always heard growing up, it's really important to stay active. I think, you know, which I saw a lot during the pandemic, if I'm sitting and not moving my body and not strategically exercising and doing physical therapy and things like that, you know, my body will kind of get used to that and it'll be harder to bounce back from. So while it doesn't technically get worse, if you're not keeping up with it, you'll kind of see those impacts of aging a little bit worse than the average person.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Most people, as they age, they feel like that's when they should stop lifting weights because it's harder on their joints and things like that. But it's quite the opposite. It's like you should lift weights as you age to kind of help your body like stay strong and to keep your bones strong. And
yeah,
I asked if it was degenerative because, you know, my eye condition is degenerative, means it like slowly, you know, affects me, you know. So each year my vision gets worse. And, you know, there's no cure for my vision. There's no cure for cerebral palsy either. But yeah, I just was curious because I like to kind of, you know, compare, I guess, what's apples to oranges or whatever.
Yeah. No, I like to too. It definitely, you know, helps everyone understand a little bit better too. So
yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think there's so many similarities, but you know, I want to talk to you about you. You know, let's talk about you. I read online that you worked in public relations for about 7 years before, you know, switching over to be a content creator. You know, like, for example, for those who don't know, you know, Chelsea, you know, her videos have been viewed over like 55 million times or by 55 million different people. And you have over like 300,000, you know, followers. Like, that's quite a large audience. And I was kind of curious, as someone like myself who's trying to build up this podcast and like kind of get into that space myself. Like, I would like to talk to you about like, what was that journey like, going from working full time in public relations to being, you know, a content creator? It seems like such a strange, you know, life journey that you probably didn't expect when you were younger, you know?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. I think whenever I describe all of this, and especially what I'm doing now, it was completely unexpected. Was never kind of a goal of mine in this way. I'll say a story I like to tell. When I was in middle school, I did see a motivational speaker at some leadership conference I was in because I was in student government and involved in stuff like that. And I remember in middle school wanting to be a motivational speaker one day, but I kind of always thought it would be after I had a whole career doing something else where I could financially like support myself and then go and do this like passion project, so to say. And then of course, social media came out. and just continue to get more and more popular. And like you said, I was in public relations. I graduated college in 2015 and went right into kind of an agency setting and really stayed there for 7 years. And then during the pandemic, I just started posting online, which a year or so before that, I had launched a blog, which really just formed out of me wanting to get some things off my chest, to be honest, just kind of exploring, what my relationship was with my disability. Because before that point, I always felt like I was comfortable with my disability and that, I was fine with it. But I was learning, especially as I'm not in, growing up with this, I'm out in the world as an adult. I'm not with the kids I was as a elementary school and college. You have your own community, and I'm out in the world as an adult and I'm meeting new people and having these experiences of people, learning me for the first time in my disability and going through the motions of some people not giving me the time of day just because of how I walk. So I was kind of like, I always lived a life, which I still do, like glass half full, and was really proud about my disability. And then I started to have these experiences that made me like take a step back and be like, wait, what is going on here? How do I really feel about it? So long story short, I launched a blog to really just myself write about the things I was feeling that I wasn't even really telling my closest friends and family. It was kind of more cathartic for me. And then I started posting more consistently during the pandemic. And again, it was really just a way for me to get some things off my chest, share things that I feel, are misconstrued about people with disabilities. Always kind of feeling that people thought topics around disabilities were this uncomfortable, scary thing. And me living with one my whole life, I'm like, it's just a part of life. Of course, there's adaptations and accessibility could be better in a lot of different areas, but it's just a part of life and it doesn't need to be scary. So that's kind of the approach I took to sharing online. And again, just wanting to get things off my chest, give perspective to my friends and family that followed me. And then when Reels launched, my videos just started to reach more and more people. And then as they started to grow and my platform was unexpectedly growing, in ways that I never could have imagined. I remember one time I picked up my phone and I had like 4,000 new followers within like the past 2 hours. And I'm like, what is going on here? Is this a scam? Have I been hacked? So it's been really interesting. It's been a lot of learning to kind of just like see it grow. And now that I have it, I was kind of put in a position between my full-time job and content creation, to pick one or the other, because both were kind of full-time jobs at one time and it was a lot to manage. And, so I ultimately decided to take the leap and try social media. I'm like, now that I have this platform, people are open to conversation around disability in ways I never had experienced in my life. I had created a community for myself and other people, and I've also met people with disabilities that I didn't really get to interact with in my everyday life. So that's kind of the quick version of how it started, me just kind of sharing what I was going through as, vulnerably and honest as I can. And I think that level of, again, just honesty really resonated with people. And while it was helpful for me, it was helpful for other people as well, just like looking to have those commonalities and, see a reflection of themselves in someone else.
Yeah, definitely. My next question was going to be like, why do you think people relate to your content so much? But you answered it, because it's like, and it's my opinion too, is like your content is very relatable because it's the truth, like you're not like sugarcoating it. Like you're showing like how you live and how you adapt, but you're doing it in a way that's honest. And you also do it with like a big smile on your face. And I think it's like that positivity is like, it's like contagious, honestly. there's just certain creators that I follow where it's like whatever they're selling to me, it's like I'm buying it. You know? And I think your content does a really good job at that. And
thank you.
And what's great about it is it's like it's you being you, and you're being vulnerable. Which, when I started this podcast, like I went from basically never talking about losing my vision to now it's like such a normal thing for me.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you went through a similar journey where it's like you went from kind of it was part of your life story, but you didn't know how open you should be, and then you kind of had your blog and started kind of putting yourself out there, which is scary for me still. And you probably didn't know how people would react, so it's probably amazing to feel like, okay, you put your vulnerable self out there, and then the world accepted it.
Yeah, completely. And I'll say I still have moments when I'm scared to share certain things, but I think similar to you, as you said, now that you're talking about it, and you have this podcast to kind of hold you accountable to continue talking about it, which was how I viewed my social media. It's just trickled into my personal life in ways I never would have imagined, where I just feel more confident. I feel more in touch with myself, because like this whole part of my identity that I was kind of pushing down for so long, now I've leaned completely into it. I've learned so much about it. And I think it's just really helped me personally develop and just come into kind of who I am more as a person, because I feel like I can be fully myself. So it sounds like you're similar there. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm getting there. It's kind of like you said, it's like never ending, but every day I feel a little bit better. Mm-hmm. It's nice. And it's and what I kind of tell people is like, it's not just going to happen. Like, you're not just going to wake up one day and like, you're going to feel like different. It takes like kind of being active. Like, you got to kind of take some risk. You got to be vulnerable, and you got to work at it. Like I also, use like therapy and, exercise and things like that to kind of help me feel a certain way about myself.
Yeah.
It takes work, and it takes like, being a little bit uncomfortable every now and then,
Yeah.
And, that's what I've learned personally. Like the more I talk on this podcast, the more like free I feel,
Yeah. And like you said, it's not only an upward journey, especially having a disability. You can wake up one day and your body's just not cooperating, and you feel like knocked down. And I talk about that too on social media. Just like I do have those days where I'm just like, I feel defeated. But for the most part, like just having those reminders of the positive stuff that has come out of sharing and being vulnerable, kind of is what pushes me to keep going. And, I feel the videos of mine that tend to do the best are videos of me just walking. And I think, the very first time I posted a video of me walking, it was such a huge decision that I honestly contemplated doing for months before I did it. And now it's something I don't even think twice about.
Yeah.
But years ago, I would honestly cringe seeing myself walk by like a reflection or something. And it was a personal thing I had to grow through and learn about. But at the time, I was like posting blogs and describing like, this is how I drag my feet. And this is like, where I felt like for people who didn't know me in real life, that they had like to truly understand like what a day of my life is to like visualize it further than that. So that's kind of what ultimately led me to doing it. Again, just being being uncomfortable, being vulnerable, sharing this part of my life. And with doing it over and over again, it's something that now I'm comfortable with. So.
Yeah, it's amazing how that works. And I think that's great for like my, listeners to hear if they're contemplating, opening it up more, or, maybe putting out a piece of content themselves to like, what makes you feel uncomfortable today, you know, if you start actively putting yourself out there more, it may be like what you're so worried about right now will actually be a breeze in a year from now.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. It's just like sometimes I feel like you just got to take that leap, you know, as corny as that sounds.
Yeah.
You know?
No, I completely agree though.
But yeah, you know, speaking of vulnerability, you know, I have, you know, a list of things I want to talk to you about, and dating. You know, I from what I hear online, you're in the dating world. And I read an article that CBS published, you know, that says that you basically, you know, have been experimenting with ways of, you know, how you disclose of your disability to you know, people who you're talking to, you know, on apps or in real life, you know. So I kind of wanted to ask you, like, how's the dating world right now?
It's rough. It's going. I mean, as you mentioned, that CBS article, and I'm pretty open about it, but it's hard to navigate dating with a disability, especially with online dating apps being kind of the main source that people of our generation use to meet people. You know, I think,
I met my wife on Hinge.
Oh, really? Nice.
Yeah.
I love hearing success stories. And
I'm a rare occasion, I guess.
Yeah, no, there's the people it works for. And I'll be honest, I feel like I don't give it my fair try sometimes just because I kind of get frustrated. But, you know, I think when I first started on the dating apps, you know, maybe 10 years ago at this point, less than that, I wasn't comfortable and open with my disability. So that's when I really was experimenting, like, do I even put it on there at all? I would literally show up to a date and not even tell the guy like beforehand, and just I, you know, a lot of different ways because I didn't know the best way to go about it. So now I have it on my profile. I also have, you know, this online presence where they can easily look it up and learn all about it, where I don't have to do that education anymore. But I'm still open to questions and stuff, and open to talking to them about it. But so far it's been the same. But from everything, what I've found, it's all about education. You know, if someone is familiar with someone with a disability, it really doesn't matter to them that much. Some people who don't know anyone with a disability, they may be a little more hesitant. But as you know, I'm like, disability doesn't define who a person is, and it's just a part of my life. And yeah, I walk a little different, but I still do all this other stuff. So yeah, it's been a roller coaster for sure.
Yeah. I mean, whenever I was out, you know, dating, like I had RP, and I would, you know, that was always like in the back of my mind. I was like, let's say things, I'd be like, you know, I'd get way ahead of myself, and I would be like, if this starts going good, you know, once I tell her about, you know, RP, like, that's it. You know, they're not going to want to like keep it going. And it made me like, even in my, you know, college years, teenage years, it made me I always had this kind of anxiety about, you know, would someone want to be with me, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like, and it's still, honestly, like, if I'm being real, like, it still affects me now, even though I'm married. I'm like, will my wife still want to be with me whenever I'm, you know, using a white cane and I need to be guided everywhere? And like,
yeah.
So I wanted to know, like you said, disability doesn't define you. Like, how do you do you do anything to kind of remind yourself of your self-worth and how valuable you are? Like, because sometimes I can kind of be my own worst enemy, you know. Do you have any advice for me, you know, to not let that get me, you know?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I think, you know, when for example, even if I'm out with a friend, you know, I'll get comments from a stranger looking directly at my friend saying like, wow, you're a great person, like, just solely for being my friend. And I think even in moments like that, where my friend gets defensive, like, oh, she's a good friend to me too, just because I'm not disabled. I think it's just reminding yourself like everything that's great about you, everything you bring to a relationship, and everything you are as an individual, because while I may not be the person my friends call to help move, to carry boxes and, go up and down flights of stairs, I'm the one they call when, they have an issue with work they need to talk through, or, they just need someone to listen or give them kind of like unbiased opinions and advice. And not everyone is good in those scenarios. So I think everyone brings different things to the table, and it's just reminding yourself, like, even though I can't do something I used to do, or I need help with certain things, you also help the other person in so many ways. So I think just reminding yourself of that. And if you or anyone listening needs like an exercise, I would say journal about it, write it down just so you can look back and remind yourself in those low times, like, I do bring a lot to the table and I'm valuable.
Yeah. No, that's great advice, because like I said, I can be my own worst critic.
We all can.
Yeah, I can get in my head, and I can really devalue myself pretty quickly if I'm having an off day. But on those days where I'm like kind of riding high, I feel like, nothing can get in my way. But, and going back to like the more, I learn about myself and the more open I am, like the easier it is for me to pull myself out of those darker times. Like before it was like I could stay there longer, but now that I've kind of built up more skills and I have kind of experimented with a lot more, it's like, I feel like I'm better. I'm quicker at like kind of reminding myself, yeah, it's good. It's good.
Yeah. No, same. And going back to kind of the journaling, but even if it is just like opening the notes app on your phone, something I've been trying to do more recently is like when I am kind of having like a really good day and I'm reflecting and I'm like, why was I so down on myself last week about X, Y, and Z? I'll try to write down how I'm feeling on my really, really good days and what that reflection is. So I can go back and look at it on my low days and be like, wait, a couple days ago, you were fine in X, Y, and Z. Like you can, just as a reminder of what you were feeling when you were so good. So you know how to help yourself pick up and move forward next time.
Yeah, that's great. That's great advice. I might have to steal that from you. It's an actual practical, tip for me to follow.
Little exercise there. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like, I don't know what it is, but it's like I forget that there's actual like tangible things that I can do, like journaling and writing. Like I put it all, like I have the personality where I'm like, I just kind of have to just constantly think about something. Like if I'm out walking my dog or like, cleaning the apartment or taking a shower, it's like that's when I'm just like thinking and ruminating and like, but yeah, it's like sometimes it's like just kind of write it down.
Even voice notes. If I'm on like a road trip and I have a good thought, I'm like, I need to remember this, and I'll like record a voice note and listen back to it later.
Would that be the kind of advice you would give someone who is out there, with a disability in the dating world? Be prepared to kind of experience a variety of different people.
Yeah, and you're definitely going to meet people who aren't open. But the way I always viewed it is my disability helps me weed out people, especially when it comes to dating. If they're right off the bat asking inappropriate questions, it helps me see what their intentions are right from the beginning. And then I know, I'm looking for something different than what this person is. And again, like the person I'm looking for is someone who is patient and understanding, and just a kind person. And if like on the first or second date, they can't even give me the courtesy to have a conversation just because of how I walk, then that's probably not the person I'm meant to be with anyway. So I think anyone kind of going or embarking on the journey of dating with a disability, just know your worth, and don't settle. And that's something I've also gone through is, making the decision, okay, this person does like me. They do want to pursue a relationship, and my disability doesn't matter to them. And I've been kind of put in the position where I'm like, even if I'm not feeling a connection, do I move forward just because they don't care about my disability? And, I've been tempted in the past, and I will say I've done it before, but I think inevitably it ends up, I make the decision where I'm like, you know what, if I'm not feeling it, that doesn't mean I need to be in this relationship. And just kind of remembering your own self-worth in that area. Just because they're okay with your disability doesn't mean it's the only thing that should make you continue dating them. It's still a very mutual decision there. So something else to keep in mind.
Oh yeah, 100%. I'm the kind of person who like operates off of feeling, like how something feels. So like, I always like if it's just something doesn't feel right, or, I tend to just kind of listen to that. I mean, that's kind of like some hippy dippy advice, but
it's good advice though. Cause I'm like, then you have the logic, and I'm like, it really should just be feeling in this case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're saying don't just settle, because someone's, accepting of your disability, like, cause you have a lot more than just your disability, and also expect, people to not approve of your disability, and then, expect for probably a variety of different reactions, to your disability. And I guess it's just kind of going in, kind of with an open mind as to what you'll get, and not have this kind of like picturesque idea of like, oh, this is going to be, this is going to be the one,
Oh, it's for like, sure. And I think, and it's definitely challenging to navigate, but, I'll say, for the most part, when people are asking questions about your disability, it really could just be they don't know. So I try to be a little patient. And if they are asking, like, I'm not rude about it. And I think that's something else, like, people with disabilities should just keep in mind, like, they just genuinely may be curious. And then once they understand, like, move on to the next topic. So it really is a very case by case basis. But yeah, overall, just be understanding. Obviously, unfortunately, there's going to be some lows in the process, but just know that person is not meant for you, and the right one, it won't matter.
Yeah, you just mentioned lows. Like, if you don't mind me asking, like, do you have like any horror stories
for dating?
Yeah, or just with people in general, just like, I guess it could be on the topic of dating, but it could be just in general, like, just an experience that even shocked you,
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I'm sure I could think of a few. I'll just share one story in terms of dating. So there was one I was on, probably like pretty not far, but not a first date, like maybe fourth date, talking for a couple months. And we just kept, what do we do? We went to a brewery, so got some drinks, just like hang out, play games, whatever. And then when we were leaving, I kind of like tripped over the curb and fell. And which is not uncommon for me. Like, I joke, my favorite line is like, fall 7 times, stand up 8. So I fell, I was fine, had a little scratch, but I got up right away. I tried to make my date feel comfortable, but, proceeded with the night. And then after that, I was essentially ghosted. And, obviously in hindsight, I'm like, the only thing I could pinpoint it on is the fall. When everything else up until that point was totally fine. So I think that kind of caught me off guard, because I think it was like a moment when I was like, oh, this person seemed to be, interested in me, and vice versa. And we had really good chemistry and all of this. But then as soon as something got maybe hard or challenging for them, instead of, having a conversation with me about it, they just ghosted me. Didn't bring it up ever, and kind of that was it. So I think in terms of dating, at the time it was hard for me to go through, and being ghosted is always frustrating. And then having to tie it to my disability specifically was challenging for me to kind of sort through. But in hindsight, now I'm like, if a guy doesn't want to or can't express, how they're feeling to me, or how a situation might have made them feel, or talk through things that we could come out together on the other side stronger, that's not necessarily, again, like someone I would want to be with if they run the second something like that happens. So that's one example there of just kind of the not, giving me the opportunity to talk it through and just making that decision and moving on.
Oh yeah. I've tripped you before plenty of times, you know, and on dates too, like I'm be walking to an Uber and I would just trip over like something on the sidewalk and just kind of, I would blame it on alcohol, always be like, but it's it's embarrassing. But then I think you tend to put more weight on it because, I didn't see what I tripped on and that's why I tripped on it. And it's like, it can kind of mess with you and kind of stick with you. It's like one of those, like, it's like, the reality is, it's like, it's cringe to you, or like, I'll speak for myself. It's cringe for me. When I think back on it, it's like one of those cringe memories, but in reality, it's like, it's really nothing. Like, it's just like you tripped over something.
Yeah.
But like you make it seem so much bigger. Like or at least I can make it seem so much bigger than it is,
Oh, definitely.
It's like everyone else has already forgotten about it, but it'll be like 5 years later and I'm still thinking about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Like me, telling this story, I'm like, this was like 4 years ago and I'm sure no one else, it crosses their mind, but I'm like, nope, it's still right there. So,
yeah. It's interesting how that is, but I appreciate you opening up and sharing that with me, cause I feel like I haven't talked that much about this on my podcast in terms of like what it's like to be out there dating. And next thing I want to talk to you about, in terms of vulnerability and kind of putting yourself out there, is your scooter, scoots, as you call it.
Yes.
And I kind of want to make another connection. So it's like in the blind, world, using a white cane, it's like the big big signal you send out to everyone to kind of like, hey everyone, I have, I'm blind, or I'm living with blindness and I have a disability. It's kind of like this orange, like neon vest, with the word disability written across it, and like even for myself, like there's sometimes at nighttime where like I could benefit from a cane, but it's like there's something mental about me using a cane where I don't want to be seen by others. So I just won't, I'll like walk extra slow, hold on to my wife or friend, whoever I'm with, just to not use a cane. So like, I wanted to ask you about that, like with your scooter, in your content, you present it as something that's really empowering. I have an idea that at some point it was like you were probably afraid to start to get on it.
Yeah.
Can we talk about that?
Yes, we can. And I'll say right now, use your cane. You'll feel much better. But no, I think so. The time in my life, I would say this is most relevant would be high school to college age. Especially, so I used a walker at that time, and that age, you're starting to hang out with friends for the first time without parents. You have coordination of like friends' cars instead of getting dropped off by your parents or whatever it is. So my walker was, it folded, but it didn't really fit into certain cars that well. So, what was the thing to do in like middle school, high school? Walk around the mall, at least like where I grew up. So, and that was challenging for me. And, just the amount of people, easy fall risk, getting exhausted. It's really hard for me to like walk and talk without getting out of breath. But I would do the same thing. I would be like, oh no, I don't need my walker. Like I'll just leave it behind. And then I'd put myself in these situations where I was just absolutely exhausted. After hanging out with my friends for like an hour or two, because I was putting myself, to the limit. I was, like I said, exhausted. I could barely keep up with them half the time. Did I need new friends? Probably, because like we could have done something not as, active, but that's a whole other story. But, and I think even using my scooter, it was more of that inconvenience factor of, it doesn't fit into everyone's car. Or how do I get from point A to point B? It's much easier for me to just, get around without it.
It's like with your friends, like, you're talking about getting new friends. It's like, it's funny because you're thinking like, you don't want to change up their routine at all. It's like, you want to just be like, well, my scooter is not going to fit in their car. They want to walk around the mall, so I can't get in their car with my scooter. And it's like, so it's like you're bending, for them.
Yeah.
And that it's funny because like, and I think like if you're someone younger who's listening, I guess what I'll say is like, the older you get, the more, and maybe you can back me up on this, the older you get, the more you like don't really care anymore.
Yeah.
You're kind of just like, yeah, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
But our younger selves really, man, we try to fit in, don't we?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I think that's what took me so long to even embrace my disability, because I kind of wanted it to go away. And I'm like, oh, I can't fit in with kids my age because like, after school, I'm going to physical therapy and they're just hanging out with each other. So things like that, like now in hindsight, I'm like, wow, I wish I would have stuck with physical therapy. But yeah, like I didn't want to be a burden to anyone. I didn't think, now looking back, I don't think they were, anyone that age, I don't think they were mature enough to understand, the need for certain medical device or medical assistance or mobility devices. But I think like even, now I see such a value of using scoots, and I know that without a doubt, I wouldn't be able to travel or do half the things I do. Because again, like I would just be so tired, like navigating around an airport or, depending on someone else to push me in a wheelchair, things like that. It just opens up so many opportunities for me that without it, I would have to have a totally different lifestyle.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I try not to be hard on myself for a younger version of myself.
Yeah, same.
So, but it's like trial and error, it's like, I think there's a lot of, to maturity and, acceptance of disability. It's like, and I remember being like a little kid, and, I didn't understand it. Like if I saw someone with a disability, it's like my head would explode, just being honest. So it's like, but it takes a lot of maturity, and, middle school, high school, unfortunately, is just not there.
Yeah.
But there is hope, because as people mature, it gets easier. People are more accepting and understanding, or at least more, not always the case.
That, I agree. I'm like, I definitely feel as a society, we're getting in a better place. There's still a very, very long way to go, but I think or I at least hope it's getting better than what it was, even 10 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. Were you ever, bullied or anything like that for using a scooter or anything like that?
So I wouldn't say, well, a little bit. Yeah. I was going to say like not blatantly to the point where someone would say like, because of your scooter, you're excluded, but it was always implied, if that makes sense. So Again, kind of back to the high school age, I think like that's when I started to have experiences like that, where I was starting to be left out exclusively because of my walker or my scooter. And I would classify that as bullying. So yeah. And I think like in college too, like people were more understanding. But there were definitely some times where I was kind of left out or not thought of, just because people thought they'd have to go through like additional hoops to get me somewhere, without asking me first and letting me be the one to make that decision, or me to be the one to kind of like figure that out. So I think that was like the biggest bullying issues I had, of just like that exclusion because of essentially my disability. Because I felt like it didn't allow me to connect with my peers or, you know, build relationships with people, especially in such like pivotal times of your life at that time. Yeah,
people think they're slick, but it's like we figure it out. We piece it together.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. And that's from the people I knew. I mean, if we're talking strangers and random encounters, like at a grocery store, then absolutely, like it happens all the time, unfortunately. But I again, like I always go back to, I mean, either the person is just a mean person or they just need like a little bit of education and awareness and compassion, which I try to meet them with depending on what they say to me. So
yeah, definitely, you know, and I think that's another like thing I think that frees you up. You kind of use as fuel for the fire, you know, as like being open and vulnerable. The more you do it, the more comfortable you feel with being open and vulnerable. But it's like takes work and like kind of time doing that.
Yeah.
Back to what we originally talked about. But also like getting shots fired when we are open and vulnerable, you know, like having some haters online, you know, or, you know, you develop, you know, thicker skin in the process. I'm not saying it doesn't hurt your feelings or hurt my feelings, but it's like, I kind of found that like when I started getting like some like really negative messages on some of the content I put out there, I thought it would bother me more than it did. But I was just like, oh, really? They think that like that person actually thinks that way? That's wild.
Yeah.
And, so I wanted to ask you, because I know you get some strange comments, because I see some of your content is like you replying to the comments in like video form. I wanted to know, like, you know, you've received a lot of, you know, negative comments. Like what are some of the negative comments, and like has those comments like shaped you at all, and like how do you process them? Like any advice for other people out there who get similar comments and it really bothers them? Like, do you have any words of advice for them?
Yeah. So yes, that's the thing, when my videos do start to go viral, they're of course reaching people who have no idea who I am. They're just kind of scrolling on Instagram or TikTok, whatever it is. They see me walking and, you know, people think I'm faking, or they have some joke they want to say. But one comment I got a couple weeks ago that kind of sticks out, which I feel like is relevant for this question. Somebody commented on one of my YouTube shorts of me I was just, like I did a farmer's market vlog.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm driving there. I take my scooter out of my car. I'm scooting around the market. I do a voiceover, just pretty simple stuff, not even really relevant to my disability, just kind of like a regular Sunday. And somebody commented, not yelling, but kind of like that they couldn't believe that I use a scooter because I'm able to walk, and why would I do something like that? So kind of like an accusatory tone. And initially, like I was kind of annoyed by this comment, because I'm like, wait, are they calling me like an imposter kind of, or like, and I felt defensive, like I needed to respond. And I'm like, no, I need this scooter and this is why, and, you know, X, Y, and Z. But now in hindsight, you know, I'm like, this person, nobody is ever going to understand the things that I need more than myself. So I think, you know, I'm the only one that needs to be okay with the things that I need or don't need, when it comes to mobility or not. And, you know, I think especially opening yourself up online, people are always going to have something to say, especially when they're hiding behind a screen. They don't have to deal with the accountability of the other person on the other end and how it makes them feel. And they just don't think of the weight of the words they put out. So whenever someone says something really negative to me, I try to think of who they are as a person. Just sitting there scrolling and feeling the need to just like write a mean comment to someone they've never met in their life. And then it kind of brings me back to reality, like, okay, really all this person is doing is adding engagement to my post. You know, I'm like,
I think about that too. I'm like, I'll take all the comments. Give me your, the engagement.
Exactly. And then I'm like, and then I have my followers who respond to them and defend me. And I'm like, okay, you know what? Like that person, they need their own work that they need to do on themselves. And that's the most I can say. So yeah, what I always say is when people comment mean things, it's more of a reflection of themselves and what they're going through than the person who actually posted. And, you know, of course, I'm open to criticism. I'm open to productive conversations. If I say something and it's offensive or I miss the mark, I'm open to those conversations. But there are some that are just plain mean. And I think those are the ones that I really just encourage everyone to brush off, try not to engage with them too much, and just, you know, there can be one of those and 100 positive ones, and it's really easy to forget all the positive ones when you get that one. But it really is important to go back and read the positive ones and remember that, you know, you're making an impact beyond what that person says.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, you know, more people should actively try to comment in more positive ways. You know, like I think some people are like, oh, that like they'll see a post and be like, oh, I love that. But like for some reason they'll be afraid to like comment it. Yeah. And then, but the sadness of it is like the person who writes the negative is never like afraid to, like, they'll always type it, you know, like they're like seeking out something weird, like psychologically, like they're like looking for trouble. Yeah. So I guess like you don't have to comment, but I try to remind myself that, you know, if you look at like the views and the likes, you know, that means a lot of people saw it and then they didn't have anything to say, you know, which kind of adds to, they had no issue with it. Yeah. You know, that kind of thing. So I don't know. That's just something I try to think about. And then you also get the, you know, positive, you know, comments, and that helps too.
Yeah, no, and even when you're saying that, like, I love the way you just described that. And it also made me think of like Yelp, for example. Like, you know, people who are leaving reviews, most of the time they only go if they're mad or like if they have something like negative to say. And normally without any kind of solution or anything thought provoking, it's just to complain or say something mean, where there are, you know, probably hundreds of people that visit whatever they're saying something negative to every day that don't go out of their way to, you know, say they had a good experience or whatever it may be. So that is a great example. So thanks for explaining it like that.
Yeah, it takes work. Sometimes you gotta rewire your brain when you start getting those weird, you know, those weird messages. Those weird comments.
Some of them will take you back, but you know, you gotta ground yourself and you're like, right, most people aren't saying this, so I should be okay.
Yeah, exactly. It's But yeah, I think that's so awesome that you get people to defend you too. Like you have people in your corner backing you up, and then, you know, you have, you know, it sounds like you've built a really tight knit, you know, friend group, and you have family, you know, that are close to you and that accept you and your disability. And that's how it should be. And that's what I advise everyone is like, find your people, you know, they're out there. Yes. And that'll be a game changer for you, you know, like, you know, to avoid those toxic people who are going to make you feel, you know, less valuable or less than, you know. It's like, you don't have to be around those people, you know?
Yeah.
Like, so
I agree.
It's like common sense, but it's also like sometimes we forget that, you know? We forget that we get to make those choices. Well, Chelsea, I could talk for hours and hours and hours, but you know, you're a busy person, and I want to not hold up your day. I know you got your to-do list to knock out.
Yes.
But yeah, I think we had an amazing conversation. I really appreciate you, you know, opening up and sharing, you know, some stories about yourself. And I think my listeners are really going to love this episode, as I usually know, because I enjoy the conversation, and I'm like, if I enjoy that, then everyone has to enjoy that. you know.
No, thank you. I loved all of your questions and topics. I think they were all good to hit on. So thank you for putting that together.
Yeah, no problem. And I look forward to seeing more of your content and seeing you grow. And yeah, I'm visiting Miami, Florida next month. It's my first time ever going to Florida.
Oh,
so
nice.
I'm excited. So
where are you now?
I'm in Brooklyn, New York.
Oh, okay. Nice.
But I grew up in North Carolina. I moved here when I was 27
Okay.
to New York. So
Okay.
I'm like really a North Carolinian, but doing the whole big city thing, I guess, at the moment.
Yeah. Either way, you'll get some warm weather down here. So
For sure.
a nice break, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Chelsea, take care. Have a good rest of your day. And for those wondering, if you want to find, some links to follow Chelsea, I included all those in the show description. Just click that. You can follow her on Instagram and TikTok. Your handle is Real Chelsea Bear, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So Real Chelsea Bear. You have a website. What's your website's name?
ChelseaBear.com.
ChelseaBear.com.
Make it easy.
I'll have that in there.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to plug?
YouTube. I'm
YouTube.
starting on YouTube now, so can add that in.
Yep. YouTube channel. Go subscribe to her channel. I'll have links to all that in the show description, and probably most of you already follow her. So, but if you don't, go check her out. Thanks again, Chelsea.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Thank you.